To Ammonite TV for our series of interviews with data leaders. Today we're talking to Jonny Bentwood, Global Head of Data and Analytics at Golin, one of the leading PR and communication companies in the world, with offices across the globe, including throughout Asia. So with Asia 2 months ahead of the West on the pandemic curve, today we're talking to Jonny about what Western brands can learn from data coming in from Asia and elsewhere. Don't forget to like or subscribe or to Ammonite TV on YouTube to see further videos in our data series. So welcome, Jonny. So interesting question. So what are your thoughts? And obviously, can you kick us off by giving us some background on you and Golin to give us some context?
Sure, I'm really happy to be speaking with you. So I've been working at Golin for around 3 years. I'm the Global Head of Data and Analytics. Golin are a PR company. So our clients are people like PepsiCo, Walmart, McDonald's. In the UK, we deal with people like Mondelez and Novartis and people like Garmin. So we cover a broad range of clients and industries. My role is to make sure we're smart about the way we use data, just as much as it's great having a gut feel about the right thing and the right strategy for companies to do. I believe that we're going to be far more successful if we base those decisions based on data. And that's why I wanted to speak with you today, because the context of the world has changed. And because of this, we're trying to advise our clients what the best thing to do is. And we can learn a lot by understanding how other companies, how other countries are looking at things. And maybe fortunately, because we've got offices in Asia, we've got people who are based in Shanghai, in Singapore, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong. They are about 2 to 3 months ahead of us at times. And we have found by understanding what they have gone through and understanding what challenges they've had a few months ago, it's enabled us to understand and predict what's happening now. Let me put things in perspective. Many companies use data modeling techniques to anticipate what is going to be important, how their customer growth will happen, what they should be doing over the next few weeks and months and years. And those data modeling techniques have been refined and perfected every month for years now. And unfortunately, I'm finding that they're now rubbish. So all that amazing investment and time and data science people have spent trying to anticipate and learn from their own internal data about what they should be doing in the future is now more irrelevant than ever. Because the only way we can truly understand what is important is if we ditch our current models and instead we take into the wider context. Because all our modelling never could have anticipated a pandemic like this. And so because of this, if we are to truly understand what we should be doing moving ahead, we need to look at data sets that are elsewhere. And we need to take the wider competitive landscape to help us understand not how we are positioned, but how we are positioned in relation to our competitors. And what better way of learning about what the future may bring than by looking to the east. So let me give you a couple of examples. In the 3rd week of January, people in China were talking about what they will do when the pandemic comes to an end and people can leave their houses. And the stories that were coming out were around, well, let's talk about bucket lists. What are the things that we would do? And you know what was in the Telegraph last week? Bucket lists. And it's like, hang on a second, we've got this way of understanding what's happening in other markets and we can translate that and learn from it what's going on here. And if that is where the modelling takes us, that's where we will go with joy.
Absolutely interesting point. And so, and you're saying also that's obviously from Asia and they're 2 months, 3 months ahead. Are there other areas of the world that you're also looking at?
Yeah, we're looking across the entire world. Now, what we've noticed is that it's not just looking to the east to understand how we can model what is going to be said, but we look at different industries. So, for example, if you look at certain markets which are doing exceedingly well, we're looking at delivery areas, we're looking at technology, we are looking at food, in-store food, as opposed to restaurant. Certain markets are doing exceedingly well. We can learn from them and understand how they moved and transgressed, understand how to model that, because they're still ahead of us. We can look at looking at different industries and different markets. We can also look at supply chain issues. So look at where manufacturing is taking place. So one of our clients is a semiconductor-based company. They get a lot of their supply routes through Asia. So now they're coming back into market. We can see how that's impacting. But then you look at companies like Walmart, who have a lot of manufacturing based elsewhere. How is that going to be impacted? So we can learn looking not just at yourself, but looking at the supply chain around the world. And this is what I was talking about how do we use disparate data sets. In the past, we looked internally at our own modeling, but now more than ever, we need to look at external data sets to understand what's going on, to be able to learn what's going on in where markets are already a bit more advanced, the challenges they faced, and how they've come through that, and apply that modeling to our current context.
And in your world, then, what sort of data sources are you talking about looking at?
So let's have a look at the easy data sources. There's about 7 different parts of the data stack that I look at. The easiest data sources around what you can get by listening to what's going on in the news and in social. That's an amazing proxy for what's going on in the entire world, because people talk about it and publish it and we write about it. For example, we talked about the supply chain and semiconductors. I now know that one company, I think UI, is going to be buying Samsung chips because of the whole issues around supply chain. So we can look at areas like that. So let's look at listening data to be able to give us that competitive intelligence. Let's look at visual clustering intelligence. So I use a company like TalkWalker to be able to understand and use the AI to look at clustering of different concepts to understand what is most central to the discussion. Quid call it the in-betweenness. I look at demographic intelligence to understand how different people in different age groups are engaging in different ways and understanding and applying. So what is the value of somebody? We're finding different kinds of people are being furloughed in one market compared to others. It's not always the oldest people who are being furloughed. Traditionally, people who are older got rid of because they're more expensive, but maybe there's greater value that they can bring. So value is not necessarily based on age, it's what they can bring to a company. It's not just their salary package. We are looking at audience intelligence for using tools like Global Web Index and ComScore and MRI and Axiom to understand how people are engaging, what their buyer behavior is, what they're doing and how they're acting, what hobbies they're doing. People already talk about how they're doing different things, their priorities in the world have changed. Well, we need to understand that so we can make those decisions. We're also looking at industry intelligence, using people like Gartner and Forrester and IDC. We're using clickstream data to understand how people, where they're spending time. So are they reading those industry reports? So we're looking at stuff like SimilarWeb to understand what websites people are spending time on to gain information. We're looking at changes in Google data, how people are searching for information. My dog has just joined the call. Everyone?
More data with the dog.
And this is the world of coronavirus. Kids, dogs, and everything else.
Very welcome.
Excellent, thank you. So we're using a variety of different information to understand what is happening, to explain, to help us gain that greater intelligence. But again, the critical thing is don't just look at yourself. We need to have a look at you and the competitive landscape in which you operate, because the current modeling techniques about yourself no longer apply. You may be crashing, but comparatively to your competitors, you may be in a great position. So it's essential now more than ever to bring the wider context and play into you. So look at yourself, your competitors, the supply chain of your competitors and yourself, and the industry landscape to give a better picture to satisfy you with your modeling techniques.
And that's a great point. But so we started off really talking about Asia and a lot of that because of they're ahead of the curve. So what about the question about relevance of data from different parts of the world, different cultures? How do you feel about that?
I think now more than ever, we've got to take in the data from different parts of the world and different cultures. The thing is, historically, we used what we call it was either called an ABC model or CCC model. We use CCC, which is what does the customer, the client, as in the brand, and the context in which we operate. And other people know that as the audience, the brand, and the context. But the same principle applies. And normally, it wouldn't make much difference what's going on in other cultures. But for the first time, as far as I ever know in my world, the context is the same for everybody, which is the coronavirus, which means we can take other data from other cultures because the context is the same. We can take their learnings and apply it to ourselves. So we're taking data from Asia and we're applying it to our own modeling. We're taking data from we've got in Western Europe and applying it to the US because we understand the different system. The context remains the same, but the learnings are consistent.
Absolutely.
We're at this strange time insofar as when companies are thinking, we're stuffed, we can't sell anything, a lot of people have hampered down and thinking, what do we say? What do we say? If you analyze the data and you look at the volume of coverage that the news is talking about, because inherently people are still trying to sell stuff. And if you have a look at social data to understand how the appetite for people to engage with these stories, and you look back over the past couple of months, you'll see that it's fallen by around 50%. Now, this is important to us because even if you turn on the news or if you pick up a newspaper, it seems to be all about the coronavirus. Actually, the volume has decreased significantly. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you can go out there and try and sell a Big Mac. What it does mean, though, is that the context has changed and we are approaching a tipping point. It's not necessarily what do we say. The actual thing is when do we say it? And I think we are about 3 weeks away from, at least in the UK, from brands to be able to start being able to say, hey, we've got something that we can support you with. Now, the context remains the same. You're still going to have to show empathy for the situation. But now is the time for planning. Now is not the time to be saying, okay, what do we do? Let's look at internal commerce or just focus on that. Now is the time to say, when it is time to go, when it is time for our business to start operating a bit more and hopefully be able to sell more, we know what to say. And that context is crucial because we understand it. And so now we can actually use the modeling techniques which I've discussed with you to be able to use this 3-week period. And it's only a short period where we can plan what we should say.
Right.
Unfortunately, though, there's another issue. We're gonna, if we look to the east again, it's highly likely that the lockdown will ease. People are going to be allowed back to, in some kind of way, to shops and to work. And capacity in the hospitals will start to get maxed out again and we'll go back into lockdown. Because if we follow that guideline, we're going to be repeating this process. So now is the planning stage where we can talk about going out and things that we could do. But it's very likely a month after that, we're going to be back in lockdown and we follow that whole planning foot cycle again.
Interesting.
So think of aspirationally. If I was a train company, where is it that you've always wanted to go? If I was a luxury good manufacturer, what is it that you want to treat yourself about? So there's different kind of approaches you can take, but this bucket list view is going to be the current thinking. And how can you look at that context to explain it?
Okay.
The other thing I've noticed is that there's a change of community feeling. And tapping into that, in its selfless point, people have gone from being selfish to selfless. And you see this on its simplest bit by people going on the streets and clapping on a Thursday night. You see this on a broad way by people volunteering to make scrubs. You see this more and more, and that community feeling is growing. So that is a new context that people could be part of. And we're recognizing that companies that are treating their employees, companies that are treating their customers well, are going to be the ones that are rewarded when we come through this.
But it's an interesting balance, that, isn't it, in terms of that sentiment about how that company gets across that message. Because, I mean, I'm sure, like me, you've been flooded with all sorts of emails and messages from companies that you deal with, some of which are getting that right and some of which are getting that wrong. So perhaps what have you seen recently where you feel companies are getting that right?
I think it's how tone deaf you are. If people acknowledge it and not out there trying to sell shit, not trying to flog stuff, but recognizing the context about the world and complementing the situation. I said, now is not the time to go to say, hey, buy a Big Mac. Now is the time to plan for when you can do that. Now, some companies can combine with the current context. There's a big thing at the moment called beard quarantine. So as a company called Just for Men, I've really latched onto that and I'm helping people. But I'm not saying no one can do things, but if you get the context right, you can engage. And what you shouldn't try and do is be tone deaf. And there's numerous stories all over the place that do that. So understand the context. It's not that you can't just go out there and try and explain your value, but do it within the current context.
Okay, so Jonny, so what are the top 5 lessons you've learned from what you're talking about?
I think if we're going away with this, and let's start it with a point of view that the economy is going to suffer, companies are going to suffer, and as much as we're trying to protect ourselves, sooner or later we're going to have to start making money. Let's be very pragmatic about this. So the point is, how can companies be successful? Number 1, change your data modeling technique. Don't look internally, look externally, not just at the East to understand where they're going several months ahead, a few months ahead of us, but also the supply chain, the industries and the macro concepts. Secondly, look at the planning area. Now is the time to plan. Now is not the time to panic. Now is not the time to try and push messages out there. Now is the time to try and figure out, we have got a 3-week window likely before the lockdown restrictions begin to ease off. How can I use this time well so that we can get out there at the right time and start talking? Third, when we do talk, what do we talk about? Well, with context is critical. You look at the successful companies, and those are the people who bring the context into it. They recognize that life is tough. They don't just go back to their previous messaging and say, hey, buy me. They recognize the current context and weave that into the situation. Fourth, look to the East to try and find out what kind of trends are out there. So I mentioned at the moment, bucket lists are great examples. That's a wonderful way of looking at contextual planning. That's an example where you can bring current context into it. And finally, recognize that things are going to change. We're on a cycle here. This is not going to be moving forward and we're going to be out and it's going to be back at it. This is going to be a continual cycle of being stuck indoors, being out, being stuck indoors again and out. And the worst modeling predicts it's going to be for quite some time. We're predicting already it's going to be 2 years of in and out kind of lockdowns. And that's crap, but we should model for that.